what we're going to do is provide a step-by-step guide for digital marketing strategy and for social media for a small business, right? Identify a marketing strategy, determine where to focus your resources, finding your audience, understanding your customer's journey, and deciding what you need to help. So I'll stop at the end of each of these and to answer questions. I want to be clear that about two things about what the seminar is and is not, right? So we are going to cover more than just social media because so much of digital marketing has nothing to do with social media, right? It's a lot of other things out there, and we want to make sure you're aware of all of the opportunities without getting into that much depth into each one. At the same time, I want to also be clear that this is really a seminar to kind of get you started down the path towards digital marketing and social media. This is not a how-to guide, you know, go to this page, click on this, do that, right? There's just way too much that we're going to cover to get down to that level of detail. Those kinds of resources are available on the SCORE website. If you're talking about, I don't know, YouTube, let's say, or Facebook, you know, there's plenty of videos that get into those sort of things, but we're not going to be able to get to that level of detail. Think of this as like in the old days when they actually had paper maps, right? You know, we're going to give you a paper map and a compass and tell you how to the kind of the direction to go and where the dangers are and, you know, what cliffs not to fall off of. But you're still going to have to get involved in a much more detailed guide as you go through the steps. So let me pause for 1 second. And Georgiana, is there any questions at this point that I can answer or you can answer?
Nothing here.
Okay, so there's a lot of chat. I'm assuming somebody must have asked if they're going to get a copy of the slides.
Right.
Not yet?
Yes.
So why don't you answer that? Go ahead.
Yes, we will send copies of the slide and the presentation. And one person said they didn't get last week's slides, and I will be sure that that happens. And I don't know why she didn't, but that's okay. We'll forward them to her. And Deb says we can see fine at home. Deborah says we can see fine at home. So that's it. So no real questions, just a bunch of chatter.
Can everybody who's here hear Georgianne? Yeah. Okay. All right, good. Yeah, if you speak up, they can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, Georgianne, on to the next slide.
Okay. There we go.
So we're starting out with the marketing strategy, and I like to bring up this message from Lewis Carroll. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So what often happens when people ask me about digital marketing and their social media is I say, okay, well, who are your customers? What do you want to say to them? And a lot of times that's not really well defined. So the first thing you have to do is really understand your marketing strategy. Next slide. So what is your marketing strategy, right? It's basically pretty simple. And we had a seminar about this earlier on. I'm going to when you get the slides, you will get a link to that seminar. And if it's possible without too much work, you could even put it in the chat for me, Georgianne. So basically, the winning, as Philip Kotler, famous marketing guy, says, there's only one winning strategy. It's to carefully define the target market and direct a superior offering to that market. So basically, what we're looking for here is very simple. It's who are your target customers, how you want to differentiate your products, and what is the offering and the message that you want to use to send to those people. So what that does is by having that, it's the fundamentals that allow you to go ahead and to do all the other stuff, all the other digital media that we're going to talk about today. And you're going to see how if you don't know those three things, it's almost impossible to do a good job with all the detailed marketing activities that you would like to do, whether it's social media or it's emails or blogs or your website, right? If you don't understand who you're trying to reach, it's almost impossible to do a good job. Go ahead, next. So what do I mean by target customers? It's this sort of thing, age, gender, various other types of information about people from a social standpoint, their behavior, that sort of thing. I'm not going to get into this in detail because we have a whole nother workshop that we did about 4 weeks ago, which I'm going to give you a link to, and I'm going to show you where the link is in just a minute. So next. And for differentiation, we talked about in that same seminar various ways you can differentiate your offering and your business versus others that are out there. And you see at the bottom, it says link to the web seminar. That is the replay to the web seminar that we did on April 1st. Goes through all this information, will help you to build a marketing strategy from which the foundation that you can do your marketing activities, your digital media, your social media, et cetera. Next. So, and this is what it often looks like, right? This is a woman who does called the Solar RN. She sells, she's a RN, she's a registered nurse, and she does solar, sells solar panels for homes. And you can see here, click, please, next, that she's identified her target market, next, her differentiations, her offering message, next. And she's also identified a couple of different groups that she wants to be able to talk to. She wants to talk to residential homeowners, but she also sees a subgroup of people who are retired and a third subgroup of people who are environmentalists. And this is very helpful when you talk about your social media, because think about it, that second and third group might be people who are looking for different kinds of messages. Like imagine somebody who's retired. As she says here, those people are very price sensitive, and they're looking for because of fixed income, they're looking for more of a fixed budget kind of thing. Well, then the social media reaching out to them is going to accentuate that sort of information. So as you can see, by clearly identifying who your audience is, then it really sets you up to be much better at being able to reach out to them online. Next. By the way, that's second, these other two groups are called buyer personas. That's a sort of a marketing term for the different groups of people in your audience with slightly different interests and needs. Next. So let me stop for a second. And Georgiana, have there been any questions in the chat? I know that one of them was the slides. Somebody asked again about the slides.
Right.
Already answered that. Are there any questions here or online?
Nothing specifically about the presentation. No.
Okay, yes. Got one here.
Which seminar was it you were referring to?
April 1st.
Was that second?
Georgiana, was that, the question is, that was the second one in the series, and it was the marketing strategy seminar. And when you get a copy of the slides, there'll be a link to the replay that you can watch to go through all of that. So that's step one, identify your marketing strategy. I don't want to go, other than to just remind you what's there, give you a quick introduction. Because that's covered in detail in that seminar, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on it today. But we got that taken care of. All right, on to the next one. Determine where to focus your resources. So Next. So as I mentioned, it's earlier, there's a wide range of digital marketing activities out there, right? And the problem for most small businesses and startups is that there's just way too much, right? They just can't do all these things, right? You barely have enough time to build a website, let alone starting to do blogs and do advertising on the on social media, reaching out to publishers, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to have some way of trying to kind of think about, from a broad standpoint, where do I want to focus my resources? And that's the first thing we're going to help you do here, is think about it from a sort of a strategic standpoint of where the best place is to focus your resources as a limited number of resources. Next. Next, Georgianne. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's good. So we're going to focus on, because this is a seminar on social media and specifically on sort of more search engine and digital marketing types of stuff. I'm going to focus on that in terms of how I would suggest thinking about where to focus your efforts. So next. So one thing that is helpful is to think of your business about in terms of how transactional it is versus relationship or impulse based. So let me take two extreme circumstances, because it's going to depend whether you want to focus on search engines or whether you want to focus on social media. So search engine is Google, but there are a lot of others. There's Bing, there's your Apple phone search engine. Even YouTube is really more of a search engine than a social media. And then social media, what we're going to talk about is all these other social media platforms. So you might say, okay, I've got both of those. Which one I want to focus on? Search engine is more transactional in the sense that people are looking for something on the spot and they're trying to find it, and they're going to a search engine and they're looking for what you want. So let's take an extreme example. Like, let's say you were a gas station that had tires for somebody who blew a spare tire, right? Now, somebody's not going to, let's take sort of the opposite, imagine an opposite situation. Somebody's not going to follow tire service stations offering tires on social media and thinking that someday that'll be good information that they might use if they have a flat. No, what is going to happen is when they have a flat tire, they're going to look for a search engine. They're going to go to a search engine. And it could be also the search engine on a map. They're going to find something nearby and they're going to get a new tire that way, right? It's a very transaction oriented kinds of situation. And you can imagine a lot of things that are like that, right? Financial services, repair services and spare parts, often medical services, right? Legal services, hardware, things like that, right? People are generally not looking to social media to build relationships with those kind of providers. Social media is much better at things like fashion, arts and crafts, sports, lifestyle, home goods, learning opportunities, hobbies. It's things that people are interested in and want to build an affinity to. Maybe they want to be a part of a community, right? So if you were starting up, you might think about, well, where is my business in this? And it's not always black or white. It's often somewhere in between. If you're a real estate agent, there's a little bit of both, right? Maybe you don't follow a real estate agent unless you are actually looking for a house, but maybe long before you're looking for a house, you start looking at the houses in the neighborhood and you start finding something online and you start following a realtor you really like. So that can be somewhere in between. Also, it can depend very much on the people involved. So for instance, and I'm not going to say all men and women are like this, but certainly myself, and my wife were like this. When she's thinking about clothes, she might follow a designer online, she might follow a store online, she might go to a social media platform, look at something. So for her, can be very social media, it can be a very good way to reach a customer like my wife. In my case, what happens is usually like the day before a wedding or something, I find out that my neck's grown another ½ inch and I can't close my white shirt, and I have to go to a men's store and get a white shirt. And so I go online, I look for men's stores near me, and I run down and I get a white shirt, right? It's very transaction oriented. So you can see, even in something as specific as clothing, different audience members might have a different approach to how they access your product. So think about your audience for your product. And again, having done that research first to do your strategy, that'll help you know what your audience is like. Next. Now we're going to look at the organic versus paid. We're going to we did the horizontal, we'll look at the vertical. So they're basically organic is of course just happens naturally without paying the platform any money, right? And paid is basically it's advertising, right? And you can advertise both on. Can you back up one? Are you able to do that lower left corner there? Yeah, one more. There we go. So just as a reminder, I should have said this early on. So within the search engine, you have search engine optimization, that's organic, and you have search engine marketing, which is where you're actually doing paid ads to drive people to your website or to a landing page or whatever. And that's sometimes called one's called SEO, the other's called SEM. For social media, you can either do it organically, that's called social media optimization, or you can do it by using advertising, that's called social media marketing, right? So those are your 4 boxes, and you're trying to figure out where I'm going to put my efforts, because I only have enough resources, whether it's your time, your money, whatever. So first of all, you're going to look at your search engine versus social media. Now we're going to look at organic versus paid. Okay, switch to the next one, Georgianne. So let me just kind of lay out the pluses and minuses of organic versus paid. So with organic, they discover you. There's a lot less cost. And the only real skills you need are sort of social media skills, which, more and more people have those skills already. There's a fairly, there's a certain amount of minimum time commitment that's probably in the neighborhood. It can be varied, but it's generally looking at about 3 to 4 hours per week, because you've got to create your different, there's a lot to doing organic social media activity. The frequency you're looking for is not necessarily daily, but it's on a regular basis. Now, the good news is you can do some scheduling, which allows you to say on a Sunday night, you can kind of lay out a bunch of stuff, but still people are going to be interacting with you. So it's a pretty regular interaction. And the time to results can be a long time, even in a positive environment. It may take, a positive outcome could be 3 to 6 months. And the data you're going to get back is fairly limited. And the ability to target your audience is fairly limited, because you're just basically putting stuff out there, hoping it reaches your target audience. Now with paid, again, there are pluses and minuses. Some of the good things are that because you're not waiting for them to discover you, you go to find them, so it's faster to get to them. In other words, it could, it could be a lot less time to actually reach your audience. There is a fairly significant cost, though, both in terms of the costs. It's called pay per click is usually the way. In other words, when somebody clicks on your ad, that's called PPC, or pay per click. And you might need some help from somebody who's sort of an expert in doing this. And the reason is because those skills are a little more specialized than just doing regular social media. But the time commitment is usually a lot less because you are not having to do it yourself. Actually, I got an idea while you're up. Could you turn down the lights a little bit? Yeah. Thanks, Ann. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see a little bit better here in the room. And what you do is you set it up and then just tune it weekly. So there's not that, regular daily back and forth that you have with organic. And the time to results can be much shorter. You can start to see results in as little as a few weeks as opposed to a few months. And then the data you can get, these platforms, when you advertise on them, will give you a lot of information about what's working and what's not. You can do A/B testing. You can do a lot of things that can get you very substantial amount of targeting and very substantial amount of information about what's working and what's not working. So, basically what it gets down to is you get a lot for doing your paid advertising, but there is a fair amount of cost involved. And most people will start off with organic, but often will start to look to see if they can do paid as they start to build their business, because then generally they can use it as an ongoing way to increase the size of their business. Next. Georgianne, next.
Oh,
Sorry.
I thought you said yes. I thought you were talking to someone.
And by the way, when I say paid targeting, these are just some examples of kind of targeting you can do. It can get very specific. Even things like income, relationship type, or people married. You can do retargeting, which is basically, have you ever gone to a website and want to buy a backpack, as an example, and then for the next week, everywhere you go, you see ads for backpacks? That's called retargeting, right? And that gives you as the business owner the ability to show ads to people who looks like they're interested in the kind of product you sell. You can do it off of your own website. Like, let's say somebody comes to you're selling backpacks, right? And somebody comes to your website and they are looking at backpacks, and now you can start popping up ads for backpacks on other people's websites. But you can even do it if they go to someone else's website. That's called similar audience retargeting. You could actually say, if somebody goes to LL Bean and looks at a backpack, I want my ad to follow them around for the next week or so for backpacks, right? So there's a credible amount of targeting that you can do in those kinds of situations. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be the same product. Let's say that you were selling diapers, right? And people before they buy diapers are usually looking for cribs, right? You could say, hey, anybody who goes and is looking for cribs online, I want to run an ad next to that crib content about my diapers that they can buy, right? So there's a lot of flexibility to do very detailed paid advertising. And that's just on the personal standpoint. From a professional standpoint, you get all sorts of things as well. Like, are they new in the job? Did they get recently promoted? Did they work at other companies beforehand? It's very, very detailed ability to do that sort of targeting. Next. So let's talk a little bit about search engine optimization. And those search engine optimization is something that's worthy of at least a whole seminar its own. So I'm only going to touch on it, but if you decide, so we've stepped back, we've looked at this and say, oh my gosh, there's so much I could do out there. I could do search engine optimization by organically improving my website. I could do advertising like on Google, right? I could optimize my social media presence, or I could do social media advertising, right? So these are sort of the four main areas that we're talking about, right? Well, what you want to do is thinking about, given that you don't have time and money to do all four of them, where are you going to focus your resources? And what I've hoped to do here is give you an idea of how you make those choices of which of those areas are best to do it. So before I go to the next thing, is there any questions, Georgianne?
Yes, there was a question, how many buyer personas would be reasonable to target? And how would it be optimal in your opinion?
So that's a really good question. In what I would suggest is you always have one major buyer persona. And if you think of a archery target, right? It's got that red circle in the middle, right? And then it's got a white circle and then another red circle and goes out, right? So I would try to have one that is your primary one. Then, and only if you can see variations of groups that should be interested in your product, think of them sort of as those circles that go out, and I would definitely prioritize them. I have seen everything from people who only had one persona, and that was perfectly fine. You saw an example of somebody who had three personas. They saw two groups that were similar. They were still homeowners, but they were different in some important way. And that's fine. And I've actually worked with people who have 8 to 10 as well. The thing you want to be careful of is if you start adding too many and you try chasing too many and they're too different from each other, you just can get overwhelmed with the amount of effort. So if you do end up with a lot more personas than just one or two or three, I would say definitely prioritize them and focus on the top one first, maybe the second or third one next, and save the other ones for when you're looking, you get into this and it's a year later and you're thinking, gee, I need an idea for a blog. Oh, here's this group down here, group number 5 or priority number 5 or 6. We haven't done a blog about their particular interest, which happens to be, in environmental concerns when it comes to solar homes, right? And that gives you ideas for doing that, and that becomes a lower priority. Any other questions, Georgianne?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, so now we'll dive into each of these in more detail. First, search engine, then more of the social media area. So next slide. Yes, we have another question.
Both slides back on the right, it said professional, and then they were. Can we go back to that?
Yeah, so if you'll go back to the slide that was said something like target, different targets. It's about 3 slides back. There, oh, that was it. That was it. There you go.
On the right.
Yes, on the right.
You're explaining if it was a person. I was confused.
Not clear about what professional means.
Yeah, is that an example of if it was Yeah, explain what that.
Yeah, no, I'll explain the two columns. That's a really good question. So I'm basically personal is just a classic consumer sort of thing, and it's everything from what your interests are. Life event could be recently married, recently going to have a pregnant, going to have a child, that sort of thing. Professional would be in your professional or business life, right? So if you were trying to reach people who were vice presidents of marketing, you want to know, what you could do it by what type of job they were in, what kind of company, what sort of industry, what their career history was. So if you think about it, just the attributes on the left side are very different because they're personal versus the attributes on the right side, which are more about your work. They're attributes, right? So in other words, I'm looking for people. So here would be an example. I'm targeting people who became vice presidents of marketing in the last 60 days, who work for a consumer goods company. And the reason that's why I'm looking for that audience is because I have a product that should be particularly interesting to them. All right, back to search engine optimization. So click ahead if you would, Georgianne. Great. So a few things about search engine optimization. So what is it? It is techniques that help you achieve better website rankings in organic search results, making it more visible to people looking for what you offer. In other words, another way of saying that is it's techniques that help your website score well on Google or any other search engine. So you're more likely to be at the top, be in the first page, be at the top. So people, specifically the target audience. Now notice there, I said the target audience. Well, in order for this to work, you need to know who your target audience is, which means you had to have done your strategy, right? So their target audience is more likely to find you. And the key things for doing that is what's called long tail keyword phrases. And these are word combinations that are most likely by your audience to use on something like Google to find what you're looking for. So, and you want it to be more than one word because you want it to be really specific. So the example I use is, let's say we'll pick something very, very sort of fun and different. We'll say, what if you had a website and one of your products was ruby red slippers? Everybody remember from The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy had the ruby red slippers. And let's say that you had ruby red slippers that people could buy, to look like Dorothy, right? Now, if you just put slippers as a keyword phrase, then everybody who's selling slippers is going to come up. That's not going to help you at all, right? If you did red slippers, still a problem because most people sell slippers are still going to pop up, and you're still not going to make the clip. But not many websites out there are featuring ruby red slippers. So by having multiple words in a sequence, the chances of you popping up on a Google search are a lot higher. Now, if you want to go even further, you could have ruby red slippers for sale Rhode Island, if it were not just an online business, but a local business, right? Now it's really getting specific, right? And so your chance of showing up on a search go up a lot. So there's a lot. What you want to do is you want to come up with, I often get asked how many of these word sequences you want to create. I would say a dozen would be good. 24 would be even better. There is a certain amount of effort in managing these, so the more you get, the more difficult it can be. But you also want to have enough that appeals to different aspects of your customers' interests. I have a couple of questions here, and I'll start over here with this gentleman. Sorry, say again.
Basically, just say that that's what we put the line.
So actually, I haven't told you yet what you were going to do with these phrases. So the question was, what are we going to, basically, what are we going to do with these, right? And I haven't told you yet what you're going to do with that's going to come up next. But you have to first create these phrases. Was there a question over here?
Do we change them every?
Well, yes. So once you create your list, now I'm not saying you should change, but you should. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, do they change every few months? And the answer is, you should have a list. You should look at it periodically, let's say once a month or something like that, and ask yourself, are they still up to date? Both in terms of what you've done to change, maybe you've changed your product mix, but also in terms of what you've learned about what your audience is looking for. And that was the next point I wanted to make. And that is, you should be thinking not just in terms of what you're selling, but what your audience is looking for, right? So let's take an example of a disease, right? Like sore feet. Well, it's not a disease, but it's a problem, right? Somebody's not going to necessarily be looking what you have to offer to fix their sore feet. So what they're going to go and enter is sore feet or solutions for sore feet, right? So you need to think about it, not just in terms of what you have to offer, but what they're going to enter in, the problem they're trying to solve. In other words, when you come up with these sequences, you want to come up with not just the solution, but the problem. By the way, you still want to do the solution because they may know the solution, right? And they may be looking for the solution, but you also want to put in the problem, right? So problem and solution, come up with a series of these. Georgianne, was there, as long as I'm answering questions, was there any questions from the audience out there?
Yeah, actually there was a comment. Google has a new chat bot in beta testing called Bard, B-A-R-D,
Yes.
and Bing has one also.
Yes, so that actually gets into the next thing. So when you get to this point where you're trying to come up with it, you will actually, there are some free tools you can use, Ubersuggest, Moz, and now ChatGPT, which is the new artificial intelligence. You can go in there and just say, what are some good keyword strings for, and then, describe what you're looking for. But also, as Georgianne just mentioned, Bing has something in testing, and so do several other platforms. So there's a lot going on in this area of tools that will be able to help you. ChatGPT is up here, and Georgianne, could you say the other ones?
Yeah, the Google chatbot is called Bard, B-A-R-D, like as in poet.
B-A-R-D, Bard.
And Bing also has one. It doesn't.
And then Bing, which is the Microsoft, has one as well. Yeah, we have another question here, gentlemen.
To have for having a search engine optimization, you need to build a web page, some kind of special web page, or including blogs, images, videos.
Yeah, so you guys are one step ahead of me here, and now I'm going to tell you what to do with this list once you come up with it. Okay, so I asked this gentleman just asked basically, what do we do with these words now that we have them? And that's really what I'm going to talk about in this next point. So let me move on and focus on this. And the relevance or ranking, this is talking about Google, but it's true of in general, is determined by about 900 different factors, plus they change regularly. So it's impossible for me to tell you exactly how to get, what exactly the algorithm is for getting to the top of a Google search. But what I will say is that the best thing you can do is to take those words that you decided are the best word strings for your target audience and to put them into your website content, website infrastructure. I haven't mentioned social media, but the same is true for social media as well. So the answer is you should use them everywhere, right? For the content, you should use them in the text, you should use them in blogs, you should use them in images, you should use them as videos. You should also use them in what's called metadata. Metadata is the stuff you can't see. If you're building a website, you'll start to learn, or you'll have the person who builds it for you will know about it. It's the stuff behind the screen, right? It's the alt text strings, it's the heading strings, whatever. You want to incorporate those keywords everywhere in your website. Also, in the infrastructure, they're also looking for things like load speed, accessibility, security, ability to do mobile, for mobile phones and stuff like that. But you basically want to get those words into all aspects of your website and also your content. Your social media content. Let me finish this one little bit here, and then I see, Georgianne, we have a couple more questions. So the other things you want to do with your website for search engine optimization, as I mentioned, is go back.
Yeah.
Is have a good, clean website from an infrastructure standpoint. If you have somebody helping you, they should know all about all this. And if you even just use somebody like, I don't know, what are some of the best known website builders? Yeah, I've got a mental block, but with that,
GoDaddy.
yeah, and any basic website builder, they should be able to help you set this up in a way that works, does well from a standpoint of being what Google's looking for. And the one other thing you might hear about is what's called high quality inbound backlinks to your site from authoritative sites and social media. So what does that mean? That means that somebody like, let's say we had one of our clients who was just a bakery who opened up, and we had the Boston Globe wrote an article about them appeared in the Boston Globe, and they had a link to the bakeries called the Nerdy Baker in East Providence. They have a link to their website from the Boston Globe. That's called a high quality backlink to your website. That's what you want. You don't want to go to some guy who sends you a completely anonymous email over the web and says, hey, I can get lots of backlinks for you. Just come here and I'll get them for you. Those won't help you at all. Those are trash sites that Google doesn't care about. You want good links. You can reach out to your vendors. That's not a bad place to get links. You can reach out to your customers and add for them. But especially if you get any sort of a podcast talks about you and a magazine talks about you, anything like that, ask them to put a backlink to your website. That'll definitely help your search engine optimization. Okay, Georgianne, was there some questions there?
Well, the Bing chat is just called Bing Chat.
Bing chat, okay.
Yeah. And then how do you find what your audience / buyers are searching for? I have some guesses, but is there the data available somewhere?
So in the old days, you would just say, you know, you have to put yourself in the mind of your target audience. Again, you need to know who your target audience is. You need to know them well enough to think about what are, you know, what kind of words do they put in there? By the way, if you have a going business or if you've talked to people who are potential target customers, you could ask them. I actually had a situation where we had, I had somebody who did what you might call sort of a children's programming, you know, could do an activity that a children would use in a birthday party. And I said, so I just happen to have a number of daughters who have young children. And I said, I emailed them and said, hey, I have a client who wants to try to do some search engine optimization. What sort of things where would you go and what kind of words would you put in if you were looking for something for a kid's birthday party? And they came back and they told me, and I, you know, that helped me to come up with those. But these tools are also very helpful. And I won't get into them because it's a lot of discussion about how they work, and they all work a little differently, but they will suggest different keyword strings. And the one nice thing about the tools is they'll tell you how much traffic there is with each of them. So if you say ruby red slippers for sale, they'll tell you, oh, there are, you know, 185 of those each week that people put in those, right? So you'll get a sense. By the way, you don't always want to go with the most because then you're competing with lots of other people, but at least you have a sense of how much traffic there is. All right, let's move on. I think we have a little more about search engine optimization, and then I want to get to the next part of this. I do want to remind you, YouTube is now just as much a search engine as it is a social media platform. People go there for looking for information the same way they look for Google. So consider having videos and consider using all the same search engine optimization techniques we talked about with the videos, using words in the text of the videos, using words in the description of the videos, their keywords that you come up with, etc. Also be aware that Google is now focused on something called search intent. So as much as we talked about keyword matches, they're often looking for answers to questions, right? So a really good way to come up with a keyword string is think about the questions that your prospects are going to ask, right? You know, where is the closest hot yoga site, or, you know, venue, right? And think about the keywords in that question, and then have on your website the answer to that question. That kind of stuff does very well with Google. And by the way, just to be clear, you don't need to use the sort of generic words, is the whatever. Just use the, you know, where hot yoga venue, or maybe even not the venue, where hot yoga, right? That's a good keyword string, right? And it's a question, right? And then you want to have some place where you answer that question. And then you want to make sure those words are there. And then Google's looking around. Here, you know, somebody needs to know where hot yoga is in Providence, Rhode Island. This looks like a really good place to send them because they ask the question and they answer it. And then think about it also from the standpoint of, I just mentioned content that answers what is type questions. What is what is hot yoga, right? Having that sort of information on your website, in your social media is good because Google will be looking for that sort of kind of thing, because people are asking, what is hot yoga? Gee, I think I might be interested if I want to know what it is. So you want to have content and you want to have keywords, strings that match that. And then for leads, a typical thing you want to have on your website is a checklist of things your audience needs to do what they need to do. So let's say that they need to get their house painted, right? And there's 15 things they need to do before they need to get the house painted. They need to go around and scrape, and they need to find places where there's rot, and they need to take that out and put new one, et cetera, right? You can imagine, right? Well, all that information, you want to have content, and you want to have also keyword strings, because those are the kinds of things that Google is going to want to be able to tell the audience. I'm using Google as an example. Of course, any search engine is the same thing. And then, by answering these kind of questions, Google will raise what's called your authority, your quality level, which makes you more of an authority and increases visibility. This is why how-to videos, for instance, do very well. I have a client who's a lawyer, and that lawyer posts a different how-to video in his area of specialty every week, right? And it makes him an authority. It answers questions that people have. Let's say you're wanting to do wills, right? If you think about it, you could come up with hundreds of questions that you might have about creating a will, right? When, how, should I put this in? What about this? Oh, I heard about that. He answers those kind of questions, right? He uses those kinds of keywords, and that makes him more appealing to Google and to YouTube. I think if you'll click, I think we're done with search engine optimization, and if so, I'll see if there are any questions before we go on. On my left side here.
I was just gonna add what you're saying, where I'm gonna be doing fashion and design. A lot of my work is just to help promote my stuff I'm selling. I'm planning on videos and talks,
Yes.
visuals of restoring a shoe or how to get this outfit on.
Right.
That's how I'm gonna create interest and become a person.
Yeah.
So you.
So what someone here is saying is, if you couldn't hear that, is even for something like fashion, right? People need how-to type information, how to make something fit properly, how to restore something, et cetera. And that all makes you authority. It all attracts, gets you higher ranking in Google. Anything else, Georgianne?
Nope.
Okay, so now let's talk about search engine marketing. So search engine optimization was, what can you do for free? Now I say for free, you might have to get some help, that might cost you something, but you're not actually paying anything to anybody to get people, you're not actually running ads in the search engine. So let's talk about search engine marketing. That's where you're actually advertising on these various types of search engines. And I'll just give you some examples. I'm going to flip through so you have a sense of what some of these are. Go ahead, next. So this is one that virtually everybody should be on. It's called Google My Business. It is free, all right? That's why you really want to be on it. And if you've ever been driving and said, typed in donut shop near me, coffee near me, gas station near me, that's Google My Business. There's an Apple version as well, but there's a Google version. And what it does is it pops up on the map, completely free to you, and directs you, shows that you're there. If you're like me, you use this all the time. If you have a business, by the way, where you are at your home and you do not want to tell people exactly where you live, it does give you the option of it only telling you the person who asks approximately where you live, right? So it would be within like a quarter of a mile or something like that. So you still get all the benefits of Google My Business, right? So let's say you were a stenographer, right? Somebody's like, well, I want a stenographer, but I want to be able to go over there every once in a while. So I don't want somebody 10 miles away. I want somebody close, right? Stenographer near me, right? Now you pop up because you're near them. Only will they find out where exactly you live if you choose to tell them, but you don't have any random person knowing who goes on there knowing exactly where you live. So it can be used even if you do not want to divulge your exact location. And if you do, of course, it's a free, really helpful, very important thing. And you want to do it on both Google and on Apple. Yes, question.
With that, so I'm assuming your contact information, your website could be on there.
Yes, so the question is the website. Yeah, in fact, and let's see, can we click to the next one, Georgianne? No, it doesn't, it's not going to give. No, back up. If you look carefully, it gives a website and will also give phone number. And again, if you chose to put it in there, and some other information, hours, etc. So it's as much or as little as you want to divulge in there. And if you click to the next one, I think you are already on the next one. You can do, if you look carefully, real carefully in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the word add under Sanctuary Salon. And that's because they are actually running an ad that moves them to the top of the list. It is not necessary to get, you can do all those other people popped up. None of them paid anything, but you can pay a little something and it'll pop you to the top of the list if you want to do that. Okay, next. Another sort of search engine optimization. This is one you're probably very familiar with. You've seen them whenever you Google something. It's called Google AdWords, and it's it's basically an ad. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it is very commonly used. Most people are very aware of it. I will say that it does give you the ability to use what's called exact phrase or broad match. Well, what that means is, remember your word lists that you're going to use for search engine optimization. You use them here too, but you can say, I only want to run my ad when there's an exact match, right? In that case, it's only if it's ruby red slippers in sequence, all three. That's an exact match. But there's also phrase match, which could mean if somebody types in slippers, ruby red, it still's going to work, right? Or broad match could be, ruby and slippers. Oh, that's close enough. We're going to include that. So you have a lot of flexibility. Again, as I mentioned earlier, when you're doing advertising, you get all sorts of analytics back, etc. This comment about answer a question. Sometimes it's good in those ads to say like, do you need, are you going as Dorothy from Wizard of Oz for Halloween? Question mark, right? Boom, that creates, it's a question which creates interest and captures people's attention. You need to, people have a tendency to gloss over these things. So you want to try to be as captivating as you can. We have a question in the back. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, if you have a lot of products, lots and lots of products, you just basically either can categorize them Like, let's say that I was selling fishing products, right? I could just have ads about fishing products, right? Or I could prioritize. Let's say I had a couple of ones that I thought were very interesting to people. There's a new kind of fly, right, that people are all excited about. Hey, fly XYZ now available, could be the headline that, oh, great, I'll do it. So there are definitely different ways to do that. And one other thing is, just to let you know, is they do offer a program that it basically amounts to 50% off on your first $300 of spend. So I think what it way works out is you spend $150, then they give you $150 worth of credit, right? So spend 150, you get 100, so $300 worth of spend, you're getting basically at half price. The thing to do is be very careful that you're paying, you want to be really careful that you are not paying for ads for people who are useless to you, right? So for example, let's take the fly fishing thing, and let's say you only sold over the counter, you didn't ship it, right? You would want to make sure that that ad only runs in an area that's reasonable for people to come to your store. If you had all these people clicking on it in Texas and California, Wyoming, and then go, oh, that's in Rhode Island, you've lost, you wasted your time, you wasted your money, right? You're paying for the click, right? So narrow, right? You might only want to run it during the daytime. You might only want to run it on weekends. You might only want to run it, and of course you can set budgets per day. Keep it as narrow as possible. When you start to achieve a certain amount of success, then you broaden it. Okay, next. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. These are a little more advanced, but it's just a reminder, you can also run ads on videos and next to content. In other words, if you've ever gone to a video, and this is just an example, and partway through the video stops and there's an ad, well, that's what this is. You can run an ad like that if you want. Or while the video is running, there's an ad sitting next to it. You can do that kind of thing, right? And you can tie it in with videos and things like that. That's all usually done on a place like YouTube. Next. And then if you mentioned back in the up corner here, somebody mentioned, what if I have a store with a lot of different products? There's a type of Google ads called shopping campaigns, and that's where you can lay out a whole catalog of different stuff. If people are shopping by product type, or if you have an e-commerce store. I have some clients who I work with who actually have a store online, right? Something like this would be well suited for them because they can put all their products in a campaign like this. And you basically have a product feed. This is a little more sophisticated, but if you do have a broad range of products, whether it's a store, a brick and mortar store, or an online store where you're selling a real range of products, this kind of thing is definitely worth looking into. Next.
We had a question.
Yeah.
How do you get on Google My Business?
Just Google My Business and go to the Google place. Don't go to any third parties. Just go to Google, and they will walk you through it. It's definitely a follow the yellow brick road, kind of thing. Answer a question, goes the next step. Answer another question, goes the next step. So is that it?
That's it.
Okay, another question in the back here. Going to go back one.
What is a product feed?
So the question is, what is a product feed? A product feed is basically that you need to be able in a shopping campaign to have a list of products that you're feeding into the search engine advertisement. In other words, you actually have to set up a ongoing, you know, what's that?
Pictures.
Yeah, it's usually pictures, descriptions, prices, and it's, you can imagine a spreadsheet, whether it's a spreadsheet or not, imagine an online spreadsheet. And ideally, if you have a lot of product, you don't want that to be manual. You want that to be set up in a way that whatever you have, your system where you have all this inventory, it can be fed directly into Google. But again, that's getting into, I want to be a little careful because that's getting into a level of detail that I'm not all that familiar with. But the simple answer is you're feeding from your systems to their systems, whether it's manual or automatic, all the information about the products that you're offering in the campaign. Obviously, if you have a lot of products you're not offering doing ads, then you don't have to include them. Okay, Georgianne.
Mhm.
So some final tips before we move on. As I sort of mentioned, I use the word narrow. Here I'll use the word focus. Where you're paying per clicks, focus on high quality opportunities. Focus, 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 right? You really want to make sure that you're only paying for clicks that you want, right? And you can go ahead and look at what people, you know, it gives you the ability to see what sort of people are clicking on. They give you all sorts of things. You want to look at that very quickly once you start a program, see what's happening. I had one situation where we were running an ad and somehow we didn't get the full we didn't narrow it down geographically enough, right? This is a bigger company, obviously, but I come in the next morning, we just started the ad campaign and we had like 120 clicks and they were all in Turkey, right? And it's like, oh my God, it's 120 wasted clicks because, you know, we had almost no business in Turkey, right? So there's lots, if you have any doubt at all, go more narrow, you can always widen. People are afraid, oh, I may not get enough clicks. That's okay. Start narrow, you can always broaden. Question in the back. What's that? So the question is, are they expensive? The cost of clicks depends on how competitive it is. And this is one of the reasons why the more narrower and the more differentiated, again, another part of your strategy, you can make it, the lower the chance that other people will be competing for those same clicks. So let's say you were selling accounting software. There's a lot of companies out there with a lot of money want to get their ads for accounting software. What's that? Yeah, basically it's a bidding war. That's right. And now you may be talking $15, $20, $25 a click, right? On the other hand, let's go back to our ruby red slippers. Maybe. What's that? No, the gentleman said, no, I can't afford that. Of course you can't, right? But somebody who's selling a $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 accounting system may be happy to get a client who's interested, right? But if you're selling ruby red slippers and nobody's selling ruby red slippers, I think the minimum is $1, right? Yeah, they may have changed that, but the last I looked, I think it was $1. So if you don't have a lot of competition, and by the way, you have the ability to set a limit, right? So a lot of times I'll set the limit at like $1.50, $1.75, right? Just get a little bit above that dollar, right? In case somebody else is saying, oh, I'll only do $1. Well, I'll do $1.10, right? You know, that kind of thing. So, yeah. Again, this is back to your strategy. Target the buyer personas, right? You have different personas, different interests, different kind of ads, right? Research the competition. We just talked about the competition. See what they're doing. There are actually tools online that will allow you to see what your competition, you can put your names of your competitors in there and it'll tell you what kind of ads they're running and what kind of stuff they're paying. I'm going to skip over the next one in the interest of time. A/B testing, for those of you who don't know, it's that you can run 2 ads simultaneously, very similar, but slightly different, and see how they do. The simplest, most common one is to change the headline a little bit. So one says, do you need ruby red slippers? And the other one says, do you need ruby red slippers for a Halloween costume, right? And Google will allow you, it'll alternate those. So the first time it runs the ad, it'll do the one, second time it'll do the other. Then the third time it'll go back and forth. And then you get to see, oh, how did one ad do versus the other? Oh, this ad got lots of clicks. This didn't. It's called A/B testing. And you can change anything. You can change the color of the font, right? Let's try this with red and green and see which one works better. So you can change anything. It's called A/B testing. You track them. And I'm going to talk about using campaigns at each stage of the funnel. I'm going to talk about that at the end. And where it says find comment is where needed to have a system in place to process leads. So the last comment I'll make about this is when you run ads, do not send the ad to a generic page like your home page. Like ruby red, do you want ruby red slippers? Click here, right? You want to make sure that that clicks through to the page where the ruby red slippers are, that all they have to do is say, add it to my cart. You don't want to go to a generic page that then they got to go, well, where are they? Well, let's see, they have footwear and then slippers and then, you do not want all that. You want it to go directly to the place where they can do what you are offering them to do, okay? What that's called, by the way, is the thing that you're asking to do is called a call to action. Sometimes you hear the word CTA, call to action. You want to make sure that the call to action matches the page that they're going to land on when they click, right? If it goes to a generic thing, then you'll lose most of your people long before they can do anything. Okay, next page, and I'm going to switch to social media now. But is there let's take a little bit of a pause. In fact, let's take a 3-minute break. People can use the restroom, including me, and I will start right at the top of the hour. Any quick questions before we do? Yes, sir.
Other than actually seeing an increase in sales,
Mm-hmm.
I think this is what it comes to. What do you trust that whatever data they're giving you is correct?
So somebody asked, can you trust Google? So here's how I would and would not trust Google, right? I would trust Google that the data you're getting back is correct, right? They're not in the business of lying to people, right? And if they were, people would figure it out pretty quickly, and not you necessarily, but the people who know what they're, really tied into this, and there would be lawsuits and it would be a big mess, right? Here's where I would not trust Google. Figure out that the only way Google makes money is to get people to do the thing that costs you money, right? So the thing they usually need to do is to click on an ad, right? Well, if what they want is they want people to click on your ad, right? So if you say, here's an example. Let's say you put in, Barrington, Rhode Island or something, right? Well, if you're not careful, if you don't very specifically make it clear that these ads are only supposed to reference Barrington, Rhode Island, or be in Barrington, Rhode Island, there might be a Barrington, Idaho, or a Barrington, Texas. Believe me, Google's going to run it there, right? Because they know people will click on it in those areas, right? So in other words, they're looking for ways to get people to click on those ads, and Google would not like me to say this, but they don't care whether those people are beneficial to you or not. And I was being a little too strong. Obviously, they want you to succeed because then they succeed. But what they really want is they want a lot of people to click. So that's why I say focus, 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 be narrow, be specific, be careful that you don't set yourself up for ads that will get you people who are not interested, and monitor it. All right, break back in, it's 10:59 now, back in 3 minutes.
Uh-oh.
Social media. Okay. Somebody asked the question, any suggestions for good analytics tools other than Google Analytics? I'm sure there are, but frankly, Google Analytics is free and a lot of the other ones charge. There are, I just think, frankly, I guess the way I would put it is that I don't have any special knowledge there that you couldn't get from just doing a quick Google search. And you, you might think, well, is Google going to tell you the truth on that? But no, you can just put, website analytic tools, social media analytic tools, and I'm sure there'll be all sorts of stuff that'll pop up. I can't say that because nearly all my experience has been with Google Analytics, I can't say that one is particularly better than the others. All right, let's, and somebody said, yeah, you can ask ChatGPT. I'll tell you, for those of you who don't know, ChatGPT is sort of the best known of these new AI programs. I've told 3 of my clients about them. One hasn't tried it yet. The other 2 tried it and absolutely love it. So it's easy. It takes about 10 minutes to sign up. There's no cost if you get the basic model. It's not that much different than doing a Google search. You just put in your question, you get back an answer, but it's much more detailed than a Google search. Doesn't send you to websites. It actually answers your question, right? Or does what it asks it. So I would strongly recommend that if you've been thinking about doing it, if you're curious about doing it, to seriously consider giving it a try. And it's great. It helps to things like write blogs or find keywords, etc. All right, this next section, find your audience, choose your platforms, build your outreach using best practices. So I want to start with this whole thing about find your audience, right? The social media, the web, is such an enormous place, right? There are trillions of different people. There are at least billions of people out there, right? If you start taking various different manifestations, it could get into the trillions, right? Getting noticed, getting to the people who you want is so hard if you don't focus. And the way you focus is you need to find out where your audience hangs out on the web. And we're going to talk about that in terms of the different platforms. And if you hang in here towards the end, I have one area that I think is one of the absolute best ones that is very much underutilized, which is actually good because that means your competition for it is very useful. And I will cover that at the end of this section. All right, next. So here are some of the broader social media platforms. I will say this, that these big ones, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. By the way, TikTok, when I first started doing this seminar back a couple years ago, was a specialty. Now it's a broad one. It's at the same level as these others. They tried in the beginning, they were more specialized. They're now getting more and more like each other. So they're actually converging. So here's an example. TikTok really took off with this sort of video, short videos for a broad range of people. Well, what happened? YouTube saw that and they created Reels, right? And now you almost can't tell the difference between the two, right? So when I talk about converging, that's what I mean. They copy each other to get more like each other. Having said that, I will do my best to try to give you some of the subtleties of how some are better than the other, depending on what kind of business you're in. So the most obvious one is age. If you're looking for it to reach the older, the boomers and the Gen X's, that could be a good platform, particularly the boomers is better suited than almost anywhere else for people in their 60s and older. Instagram, kind of right in the middle. YouTube is very, very broad. They're saying the largest age group is sort of 18 to 44, but it's a very broad. And TikTok does tend to be particularly well suited to the younger crowd, Gen Z and Alpha. But I will tell you this, and this is where I say you got to be careful. I spend way more time on TikTok than I do on Facebook, right? So, there is no simple answer, but yes, that tends to be. Gender no longer is a differentiator. They're pretty much the same across all of them. Their whole way that they do, they're focused, and it's important to think about sort of what they're doing out there in terms of what you're trying to say is a little different. Facebook is about relationships, catching up and maintaining friendships. Instagram is more about storytelling, talking about your vacation, things like that. YouTube is more around educating. It's a great place for how-to videos, right? And TikTok is very much about entertaining. And I'll give you an example when I say entertaining. The Washington Post, a very staid organization, has a TikTok account. And what do? They have fun videos about the news, right? So when they have people who create stuff, or when they see stuff that's fun, they will post it on TikTok. So it's a serious topic, but when they want to attack it in a fun, entertaining way, they will do it on a TikTok account. All right. And by the same, this, kind of sense of, what each does. So what do people do on Facebook? They go there to stay connected. Some people get their news and entertainment there. For Instagram, people often go there to kind of build their own persona and kind of tell people, who they are, what they do. I have two sort of distant relatives and friends who are pretty big on Instagram, like over 100,000 followers, and they're both on Instagram. And what it is they have a persona, right? One of them is a world traveler that goes to goes to the weirdest places you've ever seen, like inside volcanoes, and takes photographs and shows that kind of photos and videos, right? And so that's a very strong persona, right? That people go to do there. As I mentioned, YouTube is very much these days around education, and TikTok, as I mentioned, covers a lot of stuff now. And it's a little hard actually to describe what TikTok does specifically besides entertainment, because what happens is, if you're not familiar with TikTok, is they start monitoring very quickly. They throw out a bunch of stuff and they monitor what you like and what you don't like, because you either watch it or don't, you swipe down or don't, and then they start adjusting the feed, right? So if you really like the, I don't know, let's say you're a Republican or a Democrat, pretty quickly, you'll either start getting all Republican stuff or all Democratic stuff, right? I mean, it just starts adjusting. It starts looking at, well, here's a funny example. So I have a lot of grandkids now, and it fed me a couple of videos, unknowing, right, about things you can do with kids, right? One was that Home Depot has a Saturday morning thing where they can go and play at Home Depot for an hour and pretend to be selling you stuff at Home Depot. And I was like, oh my God, that's great. I sent it to all my children about their grandkids. And a couple more. Well, I'm getting all sorts of stuff now on TikTok about stuff you can do with little kids, right? So it's a little hard with TikTok to say, because they'll adjust it so much. A question. Yeah, is it algorithm based? Absolutely. Most of these are all artificial intelligence algorithms now, or they were algorithms that are being updated with our artificial intelligence.
Yes, with every positive outlet, there's a negative. So I was hearing there TikTok and China and all that. But whenever we have a
So the question this often comes up is, gee, what about, we hear these things about TikTok being in China. And you know what? I'm not an expert in this place, but I will say, first of all, nobody on TikTok has never asked me any detailed information about myself, right? So they're just probably figured out that I'm a guy of a certain age living in Providence, right? And believe me, they know a lot less about me than Facebook does, probably less than Instagram does, because those places, there's a lot of personal information. It's not just what I watch. I'm actually posting, oh, here's my vacation. Here's something I read, which I think is really cool. And I'm not posting any of that stuff on TikTok. I'm just consuming information. And, I don't, if they're located in China and somehow somebody gets a hold of that, I'm not sure the fact that, I like the fact that my grandkids can go to Home Depot and pretend, how that's going to be very useful to somebody in China, but it doesn't bother me. You may have a different opinion, and I would be perfectly fine with your opinion. I'm just saying I don't find it to be an issue myself. Okay, industries that do well. Again, this is all starting to be pretty similar. So you shouldn't, say, oh, well, I'm in sports, therefore I have to be on Instagram. But, this will give you a guide where you might think, doing your outreach on one versus the other. Whereas, for instance, YouTube will often have stuff about finance and e-commerce. But on the other hand, there's a woman who does some really cool TikTok videos about educating people on finance, right? So, consider this to be sort of a little bit of a guide, but not by no means is it like, okay, well, I'm selling this, therefore I have to be on that one. It's just a couple of thoughts. What I will say is that I'll go to the last part, which is that if you're posting from a business standpoint on Facebook, it's generally about things like story sharing, polling, asking people. Has some nice polling features, which not all the others do. It encourages a variety of different kinds of posts. And we're going to talk a little more about Facebook later on. Instagram is one of the best visual mediums. In other words, whereas Facebook is kind of cluttered, Instagram was designed for basically mobile phones, where your phone takes up the whole image is, or your whole phone is one image, right? And so striking visuals tend to do well, or visual products, eye-catching products tend to do very well. They have some very nice, quick links for shopping. I have to say, it's the platform that I have most often ordered something on, has been Instagram. That's just me personally. But I play golf, I'll see somebody, new kind of sand trap wedge, oh, well, that sounds interesting. Let me learn more about that. And in some occasions, I've actually bought stuff like that, right? And the nice thing is I can get an image or even a short video of the product. If it's eye-catching, it'll often cause me to go and buy it, as I think many other people. We talked about YouTube being more, very how-to oriented. And as I mentioned, TikTok being more entertainment oriented. So we're going to go to now some other platforms, and we are going to go into some of these in more detail later on, but are there any questions right now about any of these platforms? No. Okay, let's go.
A question just popped up.
Okay.
Okay, the cyber issue with TikTok is you give a Chinese application access to your computer behind your firewall.
Yeah, so
U.S. military, so we have banned all of our work and employee home computers. Well, that makes sense.
yeah, so yeah, you have to be aware there are some real issues if you were using a government computer, if you were using a military computer, and certainly on almost any platform, if it asks, can I, have access to this? Can I do that? The answer would be no. And it might be even worse than that. And it might be that I just don't know that. I am not, I want to be real clear. I am not a cybersecurity expert. Okay. Next. All right. So these are more focused. LinkedIn, and I'm not going to go across this time. I'm going to go down. LinkedIn this is the business to business. You don't know the term B2B. It means you're selling to a business, or you're selling to a person who works in a business, right? And it is the premier and almost the only platform, big platform out there focused on business, right? And business networking, job searches, recruiting, industry information. If you are selling, or by the way, advertising there are some great advertising opportunities on LinkedIn to target a very specific audience. I gave that example of picking people in a very specific narrow area and running ads to those types of people. By the way, if you can think of your business as you might have, a lot of businesses will actually have a B2B component to them. Let's say you're selling clothes, right? You might be selling clothes to individuals, but you might be selling for people to people who have specific kinds of jobs, right? An example might be, let's say you're selling high-end men's business suits, right? LinkedIn might be a place, I want to advertise, or I want to connect with all the lawyers. A lot of businesses, people are dressed down, right? But lawyers, bankers still dress up, right? I want to advertise to the lawyers in the Providence area, my, men's suits, for instance, so B2B can be both of all your business or part of your business. Pinterest is a very fashion and decor kind of place. People use it for shopping for weddings a lot, arts and crafts, etc. And it tends to be more female than male. This says 60% female. That was the number I was given. I wouldn't be surprised if it was actually a little bit higher than that. And it also tends to do well with the sort of somewhat younger generation. Why? That's the people who are actually usually spending a lot of money in that area. And that's not to say that, again, there aren't people outside that range, but they, they're spending money on weddings. They're spending on money setting up their home. They're, that sort of thing. So that tends to be a good platform for there. Twitter, I will tell you that, you may have heard about all the craziness at Twitter in the last year or so. Even before that, I didn't know a single person who ran a small business who's used Twitter as their main way of getting out to people. It is more for people who want to do big news and politics kind of stuff. The politicians use it, the sports people use it, celebrities use it. For us normal folks, I have generally not found it to be a great one. Now, somebody could tell me, no, Jeff, I used it, I loved it, but no one has stood up and said that to me yet. And Snapchat, I know very little about, to be honest. It's aimed at young females, which has never been an audience that I've really targeted. So I don't know a whole lot about it, but it's more a sort of a lifestyle, the things that young women are mostly interested in, brand-oriented celebrities, family, friends, that kind of thing. All right, any questions about that before we move on?
Doesn't look like it.
So you need to.
Yeah.
You have all the social media to do business, e-commerce.
So the question is, that's a really good question, and I'm sorry I didn't start off with that right in the beginning. The question was, do you need to do all these? And the answer is absolutely not. In fact, you should not do all these. What I would do is pick one or two and focus on those. And by the way, Instagram and Facebook are owned by the same place. So you can very easily do the two together. They're both owned by Meta, or Google and YouTube are owned by the same. You can connect those very easily, or just do them independently. But I would say for a small business starting out, two would probably be the max. If I were doing what do you call it? Let's say fashion. I might pick Instagram because it's very visual, and I might pick Pinterest because it's well suited to fashion, right? Another question back there. So yeah, this is clean. What sort of cleaning? You said cleaning business? Cleaning businesses and homes, right? So where would you go, right? So yeah, Facebook and Instagram, but I would say if it's businesses, LinkedIn, right? Because think of who hires the cleaning business at the business, and I mean in the target audience, and then focus on that. Is it the maintenance manager? Is it the operations manager? And then you could go specifically after that group of people to do that. What you're really trying to do is find your audience, right? Now, sometimes your audience is very broad, and we've tried with our strategy to focus them, but sometimes they're all over the place. But sometimes they're very kind of hang out one place versus the other. Let's say you were selling fishing gear, and it turns out that Instagram has a whole section in there that people who like fishing gear tend to go there. Well, that's where you want to be, right? If you were selling model railroading, it might turn out that Facebook has a group specifically for model railroading, right? Well, man, that's where you want to be. So you want to be on Facebook because in that group, in other words, you want to be where your audience is. And that's the simplest way I can describe it. And you have to figure out or guess or look around to try to find the places. And maybe it's often not one place, it's often multiple places, or it might be multiple groups. So let's say you have a product that's associated with a certain kind of music, right? Hip hop or something, right? You know, well, there might be 6 different hip hop groups, you know, within these, or there, you know, people where there's a lot of activity, and you know, 4 of them are on Instagram, or 5 more on Instagram, and 1 is on Facebook, right? Well, you know, you might do both, or you might just say, well, I'm not going to worry about the Facebook one. I'm just going to focus, but I'm going to focus within Instagram on those places that have the hip hop music. So the question is, for cleaning, the competition is going to be stiff, and the answer is, I would go back, watch the strategy seminar, and find a way you can differentiate yourself. And one of the things I talk about is location, right? Location can be a really good way to differentiate yourself. Yeah, if it's a mobile one, mobile cleaning. You know what? We're getting, in the interest of time, let me ask you to take. We want to move along here. That gets into a real specific kind of one-on-one discussion about your business. All right, Georgianne, can we move on?
Yep. Someone said, you said you would talk about a new social media option.
I am. It's a platform as much as social media, and that's going to be at the end of this section.
Okay. And then the next question is, what about Nextdoor?
Oh, well, that was almost a hint to what it is. It's not Nextdoor per se, but it's those kinds of things. And we'll get to those. In fact, I'll try to move along. We did lose a little bit of time early on, so I'm going to have to kind of pick up the pace here.
Okay.
So next. So first, in general, here's my recommendations. You know, first of all, just get out there, right? And you can start, you've got a community. You have your own personal community, supporters, partners, potential partners, employees, customers. Start to create your community through people you already know. And engage, participate, and try to create that, and try to add value back to your customers. So here would be an example. You know, it doesn't have to be the most, you know, breathtaking stuff in the world. Let's say you were a roofer, right? You could post something once a week with information about how to keep your roof from becoming a problem. Hey, it's the winter's coming. Make sure everything's off your roof so it doesn't create an ice jam that could cause a backup during the winter. That's a valuable piece of information to remind people to go out and look at their roof, right? And I'm not saying roofers should be doing this on air, but I'm just telling you, it does not have to be, you know, earth-breaking kind of or earth-shaking kind of stuff. It just has to be helpful. If you were in if you were a landscaping company, right? You could tell people, hey, if you have roses, look for this, a picture of what a leaf looks like that has a bite out of it that indicates that they might have a problem. And it turns out that in the first week in May, that's when you need to do it, because that's when these kind of bugs show up. And hey, if you see that, you know, you need to treat it. Oh, by the way, we have a treatment if you're interested, right? So in other words, you know, give people information, be of value to them, and they will appreciate your social media posts. Don't be shy. Don't be a perfectionist. Just get out there. Be a little bit edgy and memorable if you have to. Always, you know, being a little different, be a little more interesting. Almost always is the better approach. There's a concept called layering, where you communicate your message through multiple venues, formats, and messages. So in other words, let's say you pick 2 platforms, you could do the same thing on 2 different platforms. You could do something in a blog, you could do it in a video, you could do it in a chat. You know, there are all sorts of different ways you can do it. You can also tweak it by the audience. Remember, we talked about the different personas. Let's say you had 4 different personas that you're addressing. You could do the same post, but each one is worded a little different, speaking to each of those 4 different audiences, right? The older audience, the younger audience, the audience that's worried about the environmental concern. If you're doing landscaping, it would be the people who are worried about what kind of chemicals are there. If you're doing cleaning, by the way, maybe one of your subgroups is people who are worried about the chemicals in the cleaning. There's a whole product, I think it's called Method. Does that sound right? Product line called Method, right? Their whole message is we don't put harmful chemicals in our cleaning solutions, right? You could have a subgroup that is people are concerned about the chemical or environmental issues, or worried about what they're putting down the sink, you know, and getting into the water supply. You could speak to that. Very important, build your email database. So in other words, through all this interaction, yes, you want to increase your social media database, but think about the way most people, and it's probably more true for the people online than there are people here, because people here may have found out more likely from the Providence Library. Probably you found out from an email more likely than from a social media post, right? You want to build your email database. Do things that would cause people to give you their email. Hey, we'd like to let you know when there's a blog coming up. This would be maybe in the blog. Do you like this blog? Hey, click here. We'll put you on our list. Whenever a new blog comes up, we'll send you a message. Always keep it real short. Don't ask for 30 things. Preferably only one thing, and that's the email address, or maybe 1 or 2 things. The less information you ask for, the more likely people will actually reply. There's no one answer, but if you only have a couple hundred people, that's a normal place to start. You should be targeting a couple thousand people for your email database over some period of time. A year, 2 years, 3 years. And a last comment, and then I'll take questions before I move into the specifics platforms. And that is, people are surprisingly interested in back-end operations, right? This is how we do it. You know, this is how we bake the cakes. This is how we clean the gutter. This is how we do this. It makes people feel, it gives them a sense of realism. It lets people, you know, if you actually use people in your organization or yourself, it gets them to know you, and you'd be surprised. There's actually one crazy thing I never understood, but just gives you an idea of how far this will go. People will actually like the idea of watching how stuff gets boxed, right, before it gets shipped. Never understood that one, but that's what I mean. People will often find sort of behind the screen stuff to be interesting. Did I see there was a question over here?
It's more of the content of the email.
Yeah.
Can't stress that enough, because that's one thing you actually.
Yeah.
Because all these social media things, you just take away your accounts.
Right.
Any sort of reason whatsoever, and you lose your 10,000 followers.
For anybody who didn't hear that, yeah, just an agreement that that email, is really important, building that list. Next,
Get it out
what's that?
there. How do you get it out there? Like, I feel like random notifications, people want to deal with me. How do I just get my stuff and just do that? It just automatically just reaches out to me, like how people automatically reach out.
Well, the question is, how do I get people to give me their email? And what I would say is you have to earn it to a certain degree, right? You have to write a blog that people find interesting and then ask them to sign up to learn more. Or you run, in our case, like let's take SCORE, right? We'll run a seminar, right? 85 people signed up for this seminar. We have now, a lot of those are people we already had their emails, but some of those are not. That adds to our email database, right? You can do it on social media, right? And say, I want to offer you this, I have this, here's an idea. There are various different ways that you can do that. If people reach out to you with a question, if they're customers, right, you get their email address. And what I again encourage is do it infrequently, and each time add value. If you're a roofer once a month, what should people be thinking about in terms of their roof, right? And if it's value added, then you'll keep most of the people on that list. So the question is, how do people reach out to you that you're not on their list? I don't know.
Yeah.
There's actually laws now that try to prevent that. So they've used to be you could buy lists, you could borrow, if you had another company who had a list, you could just grab their list, right? And use their list or trade, I'll give you my list, you give me yours. You can't do any of that anymore. That's all illegal now. So I don't know how they're getting it, unless it was from before those laws were in effect. Yep, next. We got to move along here. So I do want to get to that one special thing here before we wrap up. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time about each of these. Facebook, what I would recommend is if you decide to go into Facebook, there are plenty of good seminars that'll give you detailed information about how to post, where to post. The most important thing I will say about Facebook is there are a lot of groups out there, and that's who you want to target, right? In other words, you don't want to just go out there into the 2 billion people, 2 billion daily users. If you are selling, I'll use the model railroading example. If you are selling model railroading gear, you want to find the model railroading groups on Facebook, right? And go and participate and initiate and engage conversations. One of the things I recommend on any platform is if you either are not wanting to be too commercial, either because that's not the way the conversation's going, or even if it's illegal, you're not allowed to be too commercial. What you can do is don't send a link to your web page, send a link to a blog, right? So somebody's talking about the problem they're having with crabgrass, right, on their lawn. You don't send a link to your crabgrass killer. You send a link to the blog where they talk about how to fix crabgrass that happens to be on your website, right? Or how to stop crabgrass, right? So see the difference between a highly commercial sort of interjection. Some places it's not a problem, by the way. Some people are talking about a topic, you can just pop right in and tell them, hey, I got this cool thing you really ought to look at. Or, you could have somebody who is an employee, who goes in on, they're going in as a person, say, hey, I know this company that does this cool thing, you ought to check them out, right? Some places that's fine, and you want to do that. Other places you don't. And what I would do is send them to something like a blog. Okay, next thing. Instagram, again, very similar because they're all getting more and more similar. All these things, by the way, Instagram and Facebook have great back-end shopping things. So you can post ads, it'll go right to a shopping thing, right? Remember how I said if you're selling the slippers, you want to go right to your own spot where you have the ruby red slippers, but you can also have it right in Instagram or right in Facebook as you learn more about that. The thing I would say about Instagram is remember that the biggest benefit of Instagram is the fact that it's a visual platform. So use the photos and videos as a way to promote your brand and your product. Use quality photos, use quality videos, make them eye-catching and make people be interested. Use that as a way to generate interest in what you have to sell. Next. LinkedIn, we've talked about that, is excellent for business to business. You can have both a personal and a business profile on LinkedIn. I would strongly recommend you use both. Showcase your company and also showcase yourself. And of course, have them linked and then have your employees on there. At SCORE, we have a SCORE website, and then we have on LinkedIn, a SCORE LinkedIn profile, and then all the not all the volunteers, but many of the volunteers have LinkedIn profiles, and then they link directly to the SCORE profile. LinkedIn Premium, there are premium like Sales Navigator, which has really good opportunities to do very, very targeted outreach. So this gentleman in the back was asking about cleaning, right? At businesses. If you were to buy, and there is a cost, but if you were to pay for LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you'd have the ability not just to find people in certain size businesses and certain type businesses, but then you'd have the ability to actually reach out to a certain number of people who you thought were the perfect person in that organization to talk to. So it wouldn't have to be somebody you had a direct LinkedIn connection to, but you could reach out to them through LinkedIn and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you. Are you in need of this? I can help you, kind of thing, right? So that's called, last I looked, it was called LinkedIn Sales Navigator, but it's basically their premium thing that they charge for. Okay, this is since we're getting towards the end, this is the next one, is the one I said I think people is underused and is very useful, and why. So the whole idea with good social media is to be targeted, right? And part of the problem is a lot of these platforms are very broad, but there are platforms that are much more targeted. And here's some examples to consider. Some of them do cost a certain amount of money. There are also ways to get around having to pay, or you could start with a very sort of a low end approach that where it's not pay, and then you could build into an approach that they're, actually are paying them. So Nextdoor is, for those of you not familiar with, you sign up and you tell them what neighborhood you live in, and it's like a chat group of people within a neighborhood, right? And there's a lot of conversation which you can follow, and people will often ask, hey, do you know a good roofer? Do you know somebody who fixes cars? Do you know a good cleaner? Do you know somebody who's a really good landscaper, right? Why would you, if you were, a tradesperson selling services in that area, why would you not want to be on Nextdoor? There are advertising abilities, just like you can advertise, but you can also just follow it and you can reply to people, right? Or you can have somebody else reply for you. You could have your sister say, oh, I know a guy happens to be your brother, who has a great roofing company. You ought to check him out. Here's his phone number, right? Or better yet, a customer who you have a close relationship who can say, I had a roof installed. It's been 5 years. It's been worked perfectly. You ought to check this guy out. He showed up right away. Pricing was fair. Was a pure professional. What's that? Very efficient, exactly. So I would strongly recommend then if you want to get in the more sort of pay to play options, you can. But think about it. There's, if your audience is, the people in Fox Point, if that's one, and the people in College Hill and the people in the Blackstone area, those are your people right there. That group of people are the people who live in that area, right? Why go looking on Facebook hoping that somebody there lives in one of those areas? The chances are very hard that you'll find those people. They're right there in that app. Similar one is Angie's List, or Home Advisor. That is a pay to play thing. You do pay Angie's List or Home Advisor if you were going to do again, similar kind of services. But keep in mind, if you go through a channel, if you're selling this water bottle through a store, the store takes a markup. They charge you something to sell your bottle of water, right? Well, it's the same thing with Angie's List. They're going to charge you something to sell your product to a customer. TripAdvisor, not only is it, first of all, if you are selling or marketing a product that somebody who is visiting would be interested in, let's say you were selling tours of downtown Providence, architectural tours, you absolutely would want to be on TripAdvisor rather than out trying to promote yourself, to the billions of people on Facebook. I'm not saying you wouldn't want to be on Facebook, but think about it. People who are coming to Providence are going to TripAdvisor to look to see what is available. This is always back to the find your audience. Where is your audience? In this case, your audience is there. But here's another interesting thing. A lot of people, myself included, who live in the area will go to TripAdvisor. If I'm looking for a place to go for dinner and I'm, haven't, been going to the same old places over and over again, hey, I wonder if there's anything, kind of off in that direction we haven't looked at. I go to TripAdvisor or Yelp or whatever. These are all very narrowly targeted. And as it sort of says here, any industry group, any affiliate group. So an industry group would be something like people who have certain kinds of, who are businesses, and you're selling a business product, right? And they're, let's say, in the chemicals business, and you're selling a product that would be bought by people in the chemicals business, right? If there's a group, go there. Affiliate group would be people that would be like the model railroaders, right? They happen to be on Facebook, but affiliate group could be anywhere, right? Look for those people. They could be on eBay, for instance, right? And so if there's an affiliate group that is really into model railroading on eBay, that's where you want to be. And in some cases, and I would definitely not recommend this at the beginning, but if you have something really special, you might want to consider building your own group from scratch, but that's a lot of work. So I only do it if the other things don't seem like a good match. All right, we only have a few minutes left. Is there any questions? And then I have one last topic I can finish up with.
Well, somebody just posted a question. What are good places to find affiliate groups?
Do a Google search. First of all, you can go on any of those platforms, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and look for groups there, right? But I would just do a search, right? Search, groups, that are interested in, let's use the model railroading, right? You can poke around pretty quickly by Googling model railroading, should be able to find where people who are doing that are hanging out. Okay, let's wrap up move on to our last question, decide what kind of help you need. So this is a tough, go to the next slide, please. In the last 5, oh, I'm sorry, there is one last thing. Once you've done the kind of stuff we've already talked about, and if you can actually click again on this, Georgianne, what I would do is think about the customer journey. The customer thinks about it from the standpoint of awareness. They learn a little more and then they make a decision, right? And this is, for us marketing people, we call this the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, and the bottom of the funnel, right? And that's from our perspective, but you want to think about from the customer's perspective, right? And as you get more sophisticated in your outreach, you can start creating social media postings that address people at different levels. So awareness might be just, getting a little bit of information out there, like I've talked about. Decision might be something like, here are some tips for buying, let's say you're selling a used car. Here are some tips for buying a used car, right? Well, now somebody's actually down a decision point. You're now sending out content that is aimed at those people who are already down to the level of making a decision. And so you have different levels of specificity and different levels of messaging based on where people are in the process. This is sort of after you've done your initial stuff and now you're trying to build things out. You start thinking about it in terms of a customer goes through a timeline. People ask me, by the way, how do you find out about a customer journey? And the simple answer is, I often ask our customers, right? Like, okay, so, hey, sit down, take somebody out to lunch. This is a little different, situation, but how did you find out about us? Where did you go? What were you interested in? What did you want to know about in the beginning? And then, then what happened next? What happened next? What happened next? And that will help help learn about the process. What you'll find is everybody's different, but everybody has some similarity in what they do. Next, we're wrapping up here, and this is basically say strategize, execute, test, measure, adjust, keep always, we talked about monitoring, analytics, A/B testing, set goals, that sort of thing. And if we'll click again, we're going through this a little fast because we're out of time. Decide what kind of help you need. And I'll say this really quickly if you'll click to the next one. And that is, and again, is, getting help for social media and digital marketing is a little bit like adding a back deck on your home, right? If you do it yourself, it's more affordable. It is, but the benefits are that you're buying knowledge, experience, tools, and getting a lot of help. And remember that social media, particularly paid, is very dynamic. Well, both organic and paid are very dynamic. So just because you knew about something 10 years ago, it changes over time. There are a lot of resources that maybe people in your own business. You can go outside firm. You can go to outsourcing. I've used Upwork and Fiverr. Those are both great platforms for finding individuals, contractors will help you. Also, if you have like a Shopify account, they will help you with your digital marketing. And, you know, there are other tools like Outbrain and ClickFunnels. I'm not necessarily recommending them. I'm just saying those are platforms that can help you with the kinds of things we're talking about. And then last comment is do your marketing strategy first, right? Get that done because everything else depends on it. Special thanks to these people. And if you'll click again, I think there's one more slide. Just a reminder that we do mentoring and we can help you. Go to this website and we can help you through this process. So that's it. I think I finished 2 minutes before the deadline. Are there any last questions? Anybody there, Georgianne? No one here.
Nothing.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your morning. You will get the slides. There are links in lots of links in the slides. Take advantage of them. Feel free to reach out to SCORE for individualized help. Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah.